Yes.
Yes.
Looks like we're ready.
Yes? Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, June 8th, 2023, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, June 1st, 2023, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of June 1st, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 and 3. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 5, accepting the revised statement of scope for submission to the governor's office and directing commission staff to prepare and transmit the necessary documents to the governor's office, and further directing staff that if the governor approves the revised statement of scope, commission staff is to prepare and submit the necessary documents to the Legislative Reference Bureau for publication in the Wisconsin Administrative Register. The suggested minute associated with agenda item 6, accepting the reports of Wisconsin electric providers and aggregators regarding compliance with the requirements of WISSTAT 196.3782A, and directing the Division of Energy Regulation and Analysis to inform each electric provider and aggregator of its compliance with the statute. Or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 7, approving the revised list of delegated items as proposed.
I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 and 3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
In docket 1 AC 258, I move we accept the revised statement of scope for submission to the governor's office, direct commission staff to prepare and transmit the necessary documents to the governor's office, and further direct commission staff that if the governor's office approves that statement of scope, prepare and submit the necessary documents to the Legislative Reference Bureau for publication in the Wisconsin Administrative Register.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And docket 5 RF 2022, I move that we accept all of the reports of Wisconsin electric providers for their RPS compliance, and that the Division of Energy Regulation and Analysis is directed to inform the electric providers and aggregators of its compliance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And in docket 5, TK 123, with many thanks to my colleagues for taking on some new delegated items, I move we approve the revised list of delegated items as proposed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 4. Agenda item 4 is docket 1AC-256. This is the rulemaking associated with updating PSC 119 for the interconnection of distributed generation facilities. The original PSC was promulgated back in 2004, and in December of 2020, we accepted a statement of scope to look at these rules and make modifications. We also authorized an advisory committee to work on the modifications to this rule, and that advisory committee met on a regular basis between May of 2021 and 2022. So we have in front of us a draft order to adopt the proposed rules. And if we accept this order adopting the proposed rules, then the necessary filings would be made with the governor's office. I was at alternative 1. I didn't have any modifications. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to first thank the commenters. There were a number of commenters that wrote in, utilities and customers and distributed generation folks. And thank the advisory committee again for their great work, and also our staff. In reading through the comments, I found there were a number of comments. Some of them kind of, as our staff said, kind of relitigating issues that had been in front of the advisory committee that maybe didn't have consensus. There were 3 items, though, and I do have a handout to share to just walk through these that I thought merited some additional sentences, some additional language in our proposed rule. And once that's sent around and Chair, let us know when you have that in front of you.
Chairperson Vach, I have emailed that to you, and for those listening online, this handout will appear on the commission events page on the lower right-hand corner under meeting handouts.
Me, oh, okay. It's this one, okay.
Okay, Cindy, did you say you emailed it?
I did.
Okay.
To share that.
I'm having connection issues. Okay, got it. I'll work off my phone.
Are you good, Chair, or do you want to read it?
Yep, I have it now.
Okay. I'll just walk through it. So there's 3 items that I thought were good to include. The first was raised by the Utilities Association and Northern States Power. And this is something that was a little newer, coming around as the advisory committee was getting to the completion of their process. But there are additional potential rules coming from MISO, the independent system operator, that would set forward study timelines for them, and that was laid out in the comments. What the 2 commenters asked for was basically a sentence understanding that those timelines aren't going to comply with the number of days that we've set out. So this addition would just say, if any additional studies are required by the independent system operator, the time periods may be extended. The second concern also came from those 2 entities, the Wisconsin Utilities Association and NSPW, and it was related to the application queue, and this is something new that we will be adopting with this rule if it gets promulgated. And that was related to certain facilities that may be in the interest of national security. It may not be in the interest of national security to have it known that they may be pursuing various distributed generation facilities. And so they asked for that flexibility that, certain in-progress applications could be either removed or redacted from that queue, from that public queue. And I thought that was reasonable. The final one really, I think the majority of the comments that were received were continued to be related to the new fees that would be applied to the Category 1, in particular installations, but then there's also a change for Category 2, and this is related to the engineering review fees and the distribution system study fees. So what we have now, there is no charge for Category 1. That's the smallest installations. There is a max of $500 for Category 2, and the proposal is to go to what is called cost-based. And we all agreed with that when we previously took this up, because there's an understanding that, number one, it's kind of the beneficiary of the DG system would pay for those costs. If there are no costs, if there's costs being incurred by the utility not paid by those applicants, then basically all other customers are going to end up paying for that. I'm not going back on my previous decision on going to cost-based, but I think that a good point was raised as to the uncertainty. How much are these going to cost? It's just not clear. There's no upper bound anymore. Rather than going down the road of that, I thought just reporting on that would be a value that the public could use, but also ourselves. And that data would also potentially help us the next time we look at PSC 119, which hopefully won't be 19 years from now, to just understand, how much do these things cost? And is there some kind of allocation of those costs that we need to be considering. So my third proposal would have, for a public utility, if you have issued those fees to these customers, Category 1 or Category 2, in a year, then basically the end of the year comes, you've got 90 days, you've got till March 31st to send in a report. Our staff would have to identify a docket and figure out how to receive that and communicate that out. But essentially, we would just get that data that we could amalgamate and then use going forward to understand, how much are these engineering studies and how much are these distribution studies actually costing on average, and how many of them are being applied. So those are my three suggestions, and happy to answer any other questions or take a break or pass the summer. Commissioner Strand, excuse me.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Commissioner Heber. I want to echo your statements about thanking the staff and the advisory committee who spent a number of years working on putting these recommendations and changes together. And thank you for digging into it and adding what I think slight changes that make it even better. So I was at alternative 1 like Chair Vaught, but I don't have any issues with these 3 minor changes. So I can definitely support those. Thank you.
Chair Vaught, do you want to comment on the 3 proposed changes?
Sure. Sorry, I have my computer's not working. So now I have transitioned to the phone. So I missed the beginning of Commissioner Hebner's explanation of item 3.
Okay.
Can you just really quickly walk me through that?
Yep. So the genesis is that this is a change from what we have today, where there are no engineering review fees or distribution study fees applied to Category 1, and there's a cap, a max of $500 for Category 2. And a number of the public comments that we received expressed concern about the uncertainty and the lack of an upper bound on those costs. So not knowing what those costs are today, my suggestion is that we just get a report on those. So if a public utility does apply those costs in a year, then by March 31st of the following year, they need to send in a report. And we would work to figure out what docket, how to receive those reports, but then we would just have that data. It's basically sort of a sunshine type of endeavor. It's not changing what we had decided, but it would just make sure that there's some transparency around what those costs are from year to year.
Okay. Got it. All right. I think that that's reasonable, and I didn't have any issues with your suggested changes to item 1 and item 2. I think, as Commissioner Strand said, they help to make the draft rules better. So thank you for that.
Okay. With that, we're ready for a motion. So I would move, consistent with alternative 2, that we modify consistent with our discussion and then approve this order adopting the proposed rules and direct the commission secretary to sign the order and direct commission staff to make the necessary filings to finalize the rule process.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That brings us to our final item on today's agenda, which is agenda item 8, docket 9814-CE-100. This is the application of High Noon Solar LLC to build a new solar electric generation facility, and Commissioner Strand has volunteered to lead the discussion. So thank you for doing that, Commissioner Strand. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Vaught. Before us today is docket 9814-CE-100, an application for a certificate of public convenience and necessity for High Noon Solar Energy LLC to construct a solar electric generating facility and a battery energy storage system. High Noon Solar Energy LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary of Invenergy Solar Development North America LLC and is an affiliate of Invenergy LLC. On July 6, 2022, High Noon Solar submitted an application for a 300 megawatt photovoltaic generation facility that includes a 165 megawatt battery energy storage system, or BESS. The project also includes a substation, an operation and maintenance area, and an approximately 1.9 mile, 345 kilovolt generator transmission tie line connecting the project substation to the point of interconnection. The point of interconnection will consist of network upgrades, including a newly constructed interconnection switchyard, which will be constructed and owned by American Transmission Company. This project is located in the towns of Arlington, Leeds, Lowville, and Hampton in Columbia County, Wisconsin. The project facilities will be located within 3,746 acres of land that have either been leased by High Noon Solar or are under purchase option. Of the acres under contract, 1,928 acres are designated for the proposed array area, and an additional 129 acres are anticipated to host the BESS project substation, O&M area, generator tie line, interconnection switchyard, and ancillary components. Again, this is a solar generating facility, which is a renewable energy resource explicitly promoted in Wisconsin's energy policy goals. As a non-combustible renewable energy source, the project is also the highest priority generation alternative. Additionally, the project is complemented by a BESS, which is designed to enhance the efficiency and integration of the solar generating facility. Furthermore, as we will discuss, the record demonstrates the project has a minimal impact on the environment. As stated in the application, no Wisconsin utilities are under contract for delivery of energy from this project. Should High Noon Solar receive its CPCN authorization, it would directly or indirectly through its affiliates construct and operate the project by selling the power using long-term power purchase agreements. Alternatively, High Noon Solar may sell or assign the project or a portion thereof to a public utility or other qualified entity at any time before, during, or after the project is constructed. Public and party hearings were held on Wednesday, March 1st of this year. In addition to the applicant, Renew Wisconsin participated as a party in the docket. This docket garnered significant public interest, which resulted in 313 public comments submitted through the PSC's electronic regulatory filing system. I just want to start off by saying that I do appreciate the participation and effort put forth by the applicant, Renew, members of the public, and commission staff on this docket. I found the record to be thorough and complete, which I know is no small task given the issues to consider and develop. Informed by the evidence in the record, I will be supporting High Noon Solar's application with modifications that will be addressed as we work through the decision matrix in front of us. But before we begin that discussion, I want to offer Chair Vaughn and Commissioner Huebner the opportunity to make any opening comments that they may have.
Thank you, Commissioner Strand. I'll just echo your statement about the thoroughness and completeness of the record. As we continue to see an influx of construction applications, I would venture to say that they're actually getting better. And so I was comfortable with the information and the evidence that we received in this case, and I will also be voting to approve the project.
Thank you. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add except for to thank the public engagement and obviously our staff, you know, super engaged. And, but I thought the public engagement was excellent. Obviously, there was a lot of support and there was a lot of concern. But especially to those that put public comments in that I took out of IRF and copied and pasted into a Word document, 11 pages. I mean, people put a lot of time and effort in, and it's noticed. You just need to know that we read it and we hear you. So looking forward to the discussion.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you. So as laid out in the decision matrix, there are 9 issues, some with many sub-issues, that the commission must address in determining whether the project as proposed qualifies for a certificate of public convenience and necessity. Of the 9 issues, issues 1, 2, 4, and 8A are uncontested. And my understanding from the commission secretary is that both Chair Vaughn and Commissioner Huebner don't have any need to discuss the uncontested items. Therefore, we'll focus our discussion on the remaining contested issues, which begin with issue 3. Issue 3 pertains to compliance with Wisconsin Statute 196.491 sub 3 sub D6 and whether or not the proposed project would unreasonably interfere with the orderly land use and development plans for the area involved. Both the applicant and Renew here are at alternative 1. Although commission staff did note that a number of environmental impacts and impacts on local land use and development can be expected from the proposed project, none of the impacts are expected to be significant or appear to unreasonably interfere with orderly land use and development. The project area that we're looking at here is mostly agricultural land, and the easements to use the properties were reached voluntarily. Therefore, I'm at alternative 1 and believe that the project does comply with Wisconsin Stat 196.491, sub 3, sub D6. And we'll open it up to Chair Vaughn first, and then Commissioner Huebner for comments on this issue.
I'm at the same place that you are, Commissioner Strand, alternative 1.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm at alternative 1 as well. The record indicates continued efforts all the way up, I think until the end, and I think we even left it open to see if a joint development agreement or local operating, agreement could be reached that never got to us. Those can sometimes be helpful, but on the flip side, there was no comment from Columbia County or any of the townships saying that this didn't comply or that they were themselves opposed and felt like this statute wasn't met. So I'm at alternative 1.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Huebner. Issue 4 is uncontested, so we'll just move straight to issue 5 then. Issue 5 asks the commission to consider whether the design and location of the proposed project is in the public interest, considering the siting criteria of Wisconsin statute 196.491 sub 3 sub D3, or if the commission should modify the proposed siting areas. In assessing this issue, the commission must consider if the design and location of the solar array sites and the alternate sites are in the public interest and would not cause undue individual hardships, and determine if the solar facilities will have an undue adverse impact on other environmental values. As we discussed previously, the proposed project facilities are to be built in an area that is largely agricultural, and most of the land within the project area is under contract. The commission's environmental assessment determined that potential impacts to non-participating landowners should be minimal. These findings, combined with the applicant's outreach efforts within the local community and commitment to address complaints, gives me confidence that the impacts to non-participating landowners have been thoroughly investigated and addressed by the applicants and commission staff. With that being said, as noted in the decision matrix, the concerns of several specific non-participating landowners with potential close proximity to solar arrays on multiple sides of their properties are included in subsequent items in this decision matrix. These are included in items 7D, 7E, and 7I. Because we'll have further discussion about those issues as we progress through the decision matrix, I will hold off on stating my position on this issue until we work through those sub-issues, and then hoping we can circle back to item 5 to kind of close that one out.
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay, great.
Great.
No objection, we'll continue then to, oh, thank you, Chair Vaughn. So we'll move to 6A, which asks the commission to weigh in on order conditions and introduces some general conditions similar to those that have been included in prior electric construction orders. The question is whether the commission's final decision for this project should include the general conditions similar to those outlined in the issue scope. For me, because these conditions are similar to those included in prior project approvals, the applicant and Renew support the conditions, and because the record did not demonstrate a deviation, I do support the conditions as presented. Also, in reviewing prior dockets that included a battery storage component, I would like to note that the commission has included a condition related to battery safety, specifically a condition that the applicant shall construct, maintain, and operate the best facilities to follow the best industry safety practices for ensuring battery fire safety. This language has been included in prior similar project authorizations, and I feel it would be important to include that condition here as well. So because of that additional condition, I'm at alternative 3. All of the conditions A through S and the additional condition, which I think maybe we'll call T, that the applicant shall construct, maintain, and operate the best facilities to follow the best industry safety practices for ensuring battery fire safety, are necessary for approval of this proposed project. Chair Vaughn, would you like to comment on this issue?
I agree with you, Commissioner Strand, and I support the addition of the condition related to battery energy storage system. It is consistent with decisions that we've made in the past, and so for that reason, I support including it as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I was coming in at Alt 1, and I just wanted to make a comment that I'm enthused, and I think Chair Vach mentioned this as well, that we've really kind of gotten our language around these consistent on a lot of these, and I think that's really good because it has been a process, but I will join you on adding the best. I think that that's also appropriate, and then there was one other one in the record that we've traditionally included, and that was, but wasn't in the decision matrix, and that's related to the MISO DPP studies. So this is in our commission staff's testimony, and it says the applicant shall provide the results of all MISO DPP studies and facilities studies related to interconnection queue positions J1410, J1411, and J1964. Any surplus interconnection study reports related to these queue positions and the generator interconnection agreements related to the project when each of them have been completed. And that's on page 8 of his testimony. And I'll note that the applicant also in Witness O'Connor's rebuttal included that along with the best one as not contested from their perspective. So I guess I'm adding to your list a 6U if you're amenable to that one.
Yep. Chair Vach, do you have any comment on that addition?
No, I'll just say good catch, Commissioner Huebner. I support it.
Okay.
Okay, so just to clarify, I believe we're at alternative 3 for 6A, and then including the bus
And
and the
DPP.
DPP additions.
And all credit goes to Elizabeth to my left on the DPP one. Good catch. Okay.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 6B. 6B is in regard to stray voltage testing. Here, commission staff suggested a detailed order condition on stray voltage testing in direct testimony that included pre and post testing at each agricultural confined animal operation within 1/2 mile of the project area. The applicant responded that it does not object conceptually to a requirement to perform pre and post-construction stray voltage testing, but did propose that the commission could modify the order condition language, which included altering the testing at each agricultural confined animal operation to within 1/2 mile of the project, quote, facilities, unquote, rather than within 1/2 mile of the project, quote, area, unquote. Here, I appreciate the comments and suggested modifications on the part of the applicant, and I also appreciate the commission staff's comments that the proposed modifications could create an unclear standard of when testing should be conducted. Ultimately, I could go either way on this decision point, but right now I am leaning towards alternative 1, which is to accept the testing as proposed by commission staff. But I am interested to hear from the other commissioners about where they are on this issue. So we'll start with Chair Vach.
Thanks, Commissioner Strand. I was also at Alt 1. I was comfortable with the language proposed by staff, and I wasn't convinced that it needed modification, so I'm at Alt 1.
Thank you.
Okay, I was at Alt 2, and I would accept the project facilities denotation, and then also the phrasing of commencing any construction activity that may interfere with testing, as opposed to the installing any metal or conductive materials into the ground as kind of the marker on that. So that's where I was.
Okay.
So.
I know that we discussed this in previous
Yeah.
dockets as well.
Yeah,
so-
it's been an evolving target on this one, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
So maybe this is just one of those things that, similar to some of those order conditions, that we'll just kind of keep working through and seeing which fits the best for each
Yeah.
project. Okay, thank you. Moving on to 7A then. Issue 7A identified 9 project-specific conditions that were suggested by DNR staff to help avoid indirect impacts to wetlands and waterways during construction of this project. Again, with this one, I do appreciate the feedback from the applicant and the responses provided by DNR staff. I did go back and review some prior commission decisions on similar best management practices issues. And in those areas, the commission was open to including some additional flexibility to the applicant by approving these conditions, quote, where applicable and practical, unquote. For this docket, I do think it's reasonable to follow that same logic, so I am at alternative 2 on this one. Approve the project-specific conditions with the modifications that those conditions are required, quote, "where applicable and practical." Again, I think this does give the applicant a bit more flexibility and appropriately weighs the fact that while the project was designed to avoid wetlands and waterways, the implementation of these best management practices, where applicable and practical, can prevent indirect impact to wetlands and waterways during construction of the project. Chair Vaughn, would you like to comment on this one?
I agree with you. I think adding where applicable and practical makes sense, and perhaps it should be included going forward.
Oh, yes, great idea, thank you. Commissioner Hebner?
Yeah, I came in at alternative 1 on this, and I can join you, though, with the additional phrasing. So I'll join you there. I think these are important, and the applicant said they agree to implement the BMPs.
Yep.
So I didn't see a problem with adding them, because what we have seen in some construction situations is, if, for example, the one I highlighted was establish vegetative cover prior to land disturbance activities, because we've had some problems with that. So I think we're learning, and we should apply those learnings to these projects. So I'll join you.
Thank you. Moving on to 7B, sub-issue 7B introduces another order condition, this one specifically relating to the applicant's proposed seed mix for the project under the arrays. Here, DNR staff testified that additional native forb or flowering species will benefit the local pollinators, to which the applicant responded that it would be difficult to convert agricultural field to grassland and that the priority should be focused on successful site stabilization and weed suppression. I did struggle with this one a little bit. I do think it's hard for me to say which course of action is most reasonable here, as there was informative testimony on both sides of this issue. Ultimately, I was not overly persuaded by the record that one approach is necessarily better than the other here. As such, I'm leaning more towards kind of a middle ground collaborative approach that would support the applicant working with DNR and commission staff on the final design seed mix for use under the solar panels, which would put me at alternative 1, which states that one of the options here is necessary for the approval of the proposed project. And I would direct the applicant to provide the DNR and commission staff an opportunity to review and comment on the final design seed mixes for the project prior to their implementation, specifically as it relates to the mix plan for use under the solar panels. The applicant did raise concerns about this additional review negatively impacting the construction project schedule. So I want to emphasize that if we do approve this alternative, that as commission staff, DNR, and the applicant are working together on this issue, I do urge them to be as timely, nimble, and responsive as possible to ensure that this review does not create unnecessary project delays, but also does consider that, making sure that the under array seed mix is appropriate for this location. Chair Vaughn?
Okay, thanks. So I was in the same spot, but different, but different. So I'm also at alternative 1. I do think that one of the options that's identified is necessary, but I actually came in wanting to direct the applicant to increase the number of native forb and flowering species and just be done with it and get it done. This is consistent with what we've done in other cases. And I share the applicant's concern about sort of time creep. If we're going back and kind of collaborating, reviewing, commenting. So I was looking at this from an efficiency standpoint, and I would require the applicants to increase the number of forbs.
Thank you. Commissioner Hebner?
I think we're all in the same spot, one or the other.
Pick an option.
My lean is actually towards where the chair is at. So if she's there, then I'm going to join her there. This has been talked about with solar projects for a long time, that this could be a great benefit of them. So I think that that's just the most easiest path forward.
Yeah,
is just
and
to increase it.
Like I said,
So,
I could go either way in this one.
Yeah.
I'm fine with agreeing with you guys to direct them to do it. And again, to kind of alleviate any of those schedule or timing concerns.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so moving on to 7C. 7C asks if a project-specific environmental resources condition is reasonable to impose as a condition of approval. In this project, a special concern herptile species was identified in the endangered resources review. This species primarily uses wetland habitats, which are for the most part avoided by this project. However, there are several areas that are close enough to wetland areas where the habitat could be impacted by the proposed project. Here again, the most reasonable approach is not super crystal clear to me. My concern with alternative one is that we don't know the true extent of the habitat area. So to say that the applicant shall avoid construction in those unknown areas from May 20th to October 15th seems overly speculative, limiting, and burdensome. I do recognize that the option exists where the applicant could install and maintain exclusion fencing, which would allow construction work to be conducted within the fenced area at any time of year, as long as the fencing is maintained. And I do appreciate that the applicant is given that option here. That said, I would feel even more comfortable with this condition if we expand the options just a bit more. I'm hoping that we could add a minor modification to this condition that would include language from prior commission decisions on an identical issue that would offer the applicant at least one more option to continue construction while still protecting these suitable nesting habitats. In my research and at least one prior action, the commission approved language stating that if the applicant cannot avoid work in such habitat during the avoidance period, and if exclusion fencing cannot be installed, the applicant shall train personnel to walk through or gently disturb the area immediately prior to disturbance, and shall carefully remove any special concern herptile species that are found to a suitable habitat outside the project area. For me, that kind of third option language provides a slightly greater range of options for the applicant to utilize, but still considers the potential impacts to habitats that may be located in the project area. Also, I do feel it's more closely aligned to previous similar condition orders on this topic. Therefore, to summarize, I am at alternative 2. A modified condition 7C is necessary for approval of the proposed project, and potentially add that kind of third fallback option regarding suitable habitats. Chair Vaughn?
I can accept your modification. I think that this is really important, and I think while I appreciate the potential impacts on construction schedule that the applicant raised, I also feel pretty strongly that as we go through and we build these projects, that we have to take the steps that are necessary to mitigate any impact, especially on any species that are identified in our environmental review. And so I was going to include this. I was at alternative 1, but I can join you at alternative 2 and accept that addition to the condition.
Thank you. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I'm in the same spot as the chair. I was at alternative 1, and I do think that this is just important. But I can join you at that.
Okay.
At that
Great.
final option.
Thank you. Okay, so issues 7D, 7E, 7F, 7G, 7H, and 7I are all from public comments that we received during that process. So I think I'm going to first kind of take them combined, and then we can walk through a couple of them at a time. So these issues did involve specific comments from members of the public. It is important to be informed and engaged on these kinds of issues. And so I was remembering when I was a kid, my grandma used to have a bumper sticker on her car that read, "Democracy is not a spectator sport." And it kept coming back to this when I was reviewing the over 300 comments that we received. So I do want to start by acknowledging and thanking the people who took the time to participate in this process through the public comments. I have reviewed the specific public comments that were addressed in these sub-issues, as well as a number of other public comments filed here, and have taken all of them into consideration in my analysis of this docket. However, these sub-issues are challenging for several reasons, including that they contain general statements and/or suggested order conditions that would make significant changes to the project, but aren't necessarily fully developed or supported by the record. Furthermore, I do believe that these suggested conditions could threaten the overall viability of the project. Again, we'll try to walk through these sub-issues in my positions, but I do look forward to hearing from Chair Vaughn and Commissioner Huebner on them as well, because again, I do think they're important to consider. So the first two that I would like to take up are 7D and 7E. Here, the commenters did not request a specific recommendation other than, if you dug into their comments, such as overall rejection of the project. Absent a specific request and information in the record supporting that request, I'm not very comfortable developing a condition or modification on behalf of these comments. I can either move on to F, G, H, and I, or if you guys would like to comment about D and E specifically, we can do that, whatever process or order you guys are more comfortable with. Chair Vok, do you have a preference?
Sure. I can comment on 7D and E. I was in the exact same place that you are. I'm at all three for both of them. And that's because the comments were really mostly just oppositional in nature and absent a specific issue that could be developed on the record. I would echo your comments that making modifications based on general comments can actually work to threaten the viability of the project in total, and I think that that's a dangerous path to go down. So for D and E, I was at alternative 3.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, no, I appreciate where you guys are at. On these two, I was actually at alternative 1 on these two. And that's just because in those two particular instances, these are alternative arrays that, if the alternatives are used, you would surround these properties on all three sides. Now, both of the properties have trees and shrubs and outbuildings, what have you, that it's not gonna be a view thing. I think it's just as we are doing more of these, and we have a lot of applications coming, and the MISO queue is filled with more, that where we can make adjustments that make these compatible with the choices that these counties and townships have made. I mean, the situations here are that, this used to be farm ground, and at some point you could, carve out the 2 acres and put a home on it, because these are non-participating homeowners. So they don't farm. They just live there. And I just think that coexisting with the property owners who own everything around that house, they've been farming it forever. I just think that it's in the public interest to just kind of back away from all three sides of those properties. So I actually thought they were okay. Specifically, I thought the developer did a nice job, though, and those aren't the primary arrays. So they've already recognized that, and the spaces that they're talking about on 7D and E are alternates, and so they're unlikely to be used. But I would just, because they're alternates, I would say, yeah, just don't put your alternates there. If you need alternates, use some of the others with less impact. So that's what I would have done.
Okay.
But I appreciate where you're at.
Okay, thank you for
Okay.
those comments.
Yep.
That's helpful. Okay, so the next sub-issues that we'll take up are 7F, 7G, 7H, and 7I. Here I do appreciate the detailed and passionate comments and the suggestion with specific recommendations. However, for me, a lot of these things weren't raised by staff, the DNR, the interveners. The record did not demonstrate that these recommendations should be included in any commission directive. And I do have some concerns that implementing these could negatively impact the overall viability of the project. I feel that ordering these kinds of conditions could put the commission on a slippery slope of overburdensome and unnecessary regulation and could have a chilling effect on future solar development projects in Wisconsin. Therefore, for sub-issues 7F through 7I, I am at alternative 3. I don't think they're necessary for the approval of the proposed project. But again, these are very important things to consider from obviously very engaged landowners. So I'm curious to hear from Chair Bach and Commissioner Huebner on these as well.
Thanks, Commissioner Strand. I was in the exact same spot as you were. I was at alternative 3 for all of these sub-issues.
Thank you. Commissioner Huebner?
I'm in the same spot, but I'm going to address a few things. I think number one, as I said before, I mean, we hear you and the passion and the concern and the investment in particular for 7F, the Schoenberg farm, strawberries, peaches, the U-pick. I mean, we've all been there and we get it. And I don't want negative impacts on your farm. The question is substantial evidence in the record, and I think the biggest concern really is the construction. You know, I think once constructed, I'm not concerned. I think the question is construction. So we dug pretty deep into the maps, you know, in particular of where these access roads are gonna be.
All routes do.
Because I think that was one of the big concerns, was sort of how close are these access roads? People are gonna be driving on these, dust is gonna fly in the air and affect the growing periods. So from what I could see where the access roads were, it did not rise to a level where we needed to either exclude GNL or move them back. I think the question about vegetative boundaries is one that we actually have included in the past. We have actually asked developers to work with non-participating neighbors on vegetation boundaries, so that could be something we consider. The other avenue for these particular individuals is the good neighbor agreements. You know, I think the applicant has shown, they had evidence in the record of one individual that they have a good neighbor agreement with, that they're gonna plant vegetation, thoughtful working with them about where it's gonna be planted on the participating landowner's property versus this non-participants. They had to move some things around because of sewer. I mean, that's evidence that they are working with those non-participants, and I think that really is the avenue forward. I think if there's a concern that the vegetative screening can alleviate, that may be a place to be. I mean, one of the challenges for me when you think about dust is, if these are corn and soybeans now, I mean, I grew up all around corn and soybean farms, okay? So there is no vegetative cover on those, you know? Until the corn pops through, the soybeans pop through, that's wide open, you know, soil. So if it gets dry and it gets windy, it's gonna blow. And that's the way it is today. So I just didn't see evidence that the solar farms, specifically with the vegetative covers that they're gonna have, I think including the DNR recommendation that we did to say, hey, you need to plant something down as you're doing this construction so that you don't have the soil runoff and the dust runoff. To me, that's the resolution. And then, like I said, the gravel roads in particular, in L, they are close to that property boundary, one for a segment. So looking at that, maybe there's a good neighbor agreement piece that this landowner can work out. So with those extra comments, I'm at alternative 3 on 7F. On 7G, this reminds me, Chair Vach, of the heat island question. This, I wrote down ag research project for the soil samples. Maybe there's something for UW Extension or one of our universities to be looking at that could be developed. There's agrivoltaics is in one of these. That's another great idea, another great research project. Not something that we're gonna order because it's not in our statutes. And then the wildlife monitoring, that's something that was more prevalently talked about. I'm not sure what this particular applicant is planning to do on wildlife monitoring. There really was nothing in the record about it, but typically these developers do have some kind of reporting system. So the only one that I would consider then would be really under 7H, and that's the one that we haven't included in the past, something to the effect of non-participating or neighbors' view sheds, or, you know, just their views, not views, but their situations, whether or not to, you know, encourage the applicant to do visual screen tree plantings. I don't have this specific language in front of me. I know that we have done that in the past, so. But you're all at Alt 3, so I'm gonna join you there. Okay.
Thank you for those thoughtful comments. You raised some really good points, and I do thank you for pointing out the kind of cooperative, open communication that's happened and hopefully continues to happen between the applicant and these non-participating landowners to try to alleviate at least some of the concerns. Okay, that takes us now to issues 7J and 7K, which I'm going to combine because they address very similar issues. Issue J, which is the condition that was suggested to us by Operating Engineers Local 139, Construction Business Group, and the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters. And then 7K are conditions suggested by the Wisconsin Laborers District Council. So these proposed conditions are similar to those that the commission has approved in other dockets, where the ones that have come before me in my short tenure, I am a strong supporter of hiring Wisconsin workers on these projects in order to maximize the positive economic impacts and the other ancillary benefits that these developments bring to our communities. I think gathering data on these workforce and hiring efforts is one tool that we have to measure our progress on that front. To address and implement the spirit of these two sub-issues, I am proposing a joint condition that I believe adequately targets the information that we're seeking and is consistent with the language approved by the commission in previous similar dockets. So my specific proposal is that a condition that the applicant shall report on a quarterly basis on its efforts and the efforts of its contractors to recruit Wisconsin residents to fill employment opportunities created by the construction of this project. Further, in these quarterly reports, the applicant shall provide the total number of construction workers employed on the project and the total number of construction workers who are Wisconsin residents. So hopefully that kind of combines the types of information that are being sought by these commenters. And that puts me at alternative 2 for 7J and for 7K. Chair Bach?
I agree 100%, Commissioner Strand. It's an issue of transparency, and at the end of the day, if you take the long-term view of this condition that we have been consistently including in these projects, if you take the long-term view, it's only going to benefit developers in the long run when they go to communities and they have something to point to that says we are hiring Wisconsin workers. And I think it's a win-win. And so I feel very strongly about both of these issues, and I can accept your proposal to modify and consolidate them both into a single condition.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to join you. I think your solution was creative, and I'll do it.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Commissioner Huebner. Moving on to issue 7L. This raises the topic of final engineering plans and asks if a project-specific condition pertaining to the provision of final detailed engineering plans would be reasonable to impose as a condition of approval. As stated in the issue scope, the commission first began imposing a form of this condition as a condition of approval in docket 9801-CE-100 due to the newness of BESS in Wisconsin. And the commission has imposed a similar condition as a condition of approval in other dockets involving BESS, such as 9806-CE-100 and 9811-CE-100. In its application, the applicant provided the manufacturers and models for the equipment used for the basis of approximate design calculations for estimates used in the application. However, the applicant also stated that equipment selection has not been finalized and that it will make final equipment selection based on technology and pricing available at the time of final engineering design. I just think it's important for us to have as much information as possible about these projects, especially because right now we don't know which selections are going to occur. So for this issue, I am at alternative 1. I do appreciate the staff's attempt to address concerns raised by the applicant, and I found that the modified order condition to be reasonable as it still tracks closely with prior commission-approved conditions. Chair Bach?
I agree with you. I was at alt 1.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Huebner?
I'm going to join you at Alt 1. I will say that I think this may be one where we're going to have to fine tune a little bit what exactly is going on. Because my understanding, as you just described, Commissioner Strand, is we are presented with example, solar panels, BESS, likely to be the types that we would see, but not the final ones because you've got all kinds of issues. It may be 18 months before they're ordered, supply chain issues, you don't know specifically, and the technologies keep improving. There's a new model every year. So my understanding is what we were trying to get was, okay, once you've actually selected that BESS, we want to know what it is so that we can, if we need to check some sort of National Electric Code, some sort of UL listing, something like this, we want to be sure that there's no red flags listed. So that's sort of, you're telling us what you've actually ordered. And I think what the applicant was talking about was the whole project. Now they've built the entire project and they're going to send in the as-built. And so I just want to be sure that I don't know, maybe we're interested in both of those. I'm more interested in the first one I'm talking about, what equipment are you actually gonna use? And making sure that, especially with the battery, that, the safety, that we don't have any concerns from a staff perspective on if it's a different type of chemistry, something we haven't seen, something that hasn't been tested in the field. That's when things might come back to the commission and say, okay, they've just proposed some battery chemistry that no one's ever done before. Now, I don't think that's likely, but those are the kinds of things that we want to have that
This information.
string attached.
Yep.
So I guess maybe it's just a clarification. So I'm fine joining you. I just, well, I've said what I had to say, so there you go.
No, those are really helpful comments. I think it's part of our responsibility as a regulator is to have this information available
Yeah.
to us, because to your point, if something happens, we're gonna need to answer for it.
Yep.
So, and the way for us to do that is to be informed on what was selected. So thank you for those comments. On 7L. So because we've worked through the sub-issues in 7, I think it's probably better for us to go back to issue 5 now and just
Yep.
close that up, wrap that up. In consideration of my positions that we've discussed in issue 7, I am at alternative 1. But I know that we did have a robust discussion and there are some really good options involved. So I'm curious to hear Chair Bach and Commissioner Huebner's comments on issue 5.
For me, I am the same spot as you, Commissioner Strand. I'm at alternative 1 for issue 5.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
Commissioner
and
Huebner?
I would be at alternative 2, just consistent with the things I mentioned. I would have excluded the alternate arrays E15 and A5, consistent with my spot on issues 7D and 7E.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. 8A is uncontested, so we'll move on then to issue 8B. 8B asks if the project will have an undue adverse impact on other environmental values as provided under WSStat section 196.491 sub 3 sub D4. In consideration of the evidence in the record, I am at alternative 1 on this issue. The proposed project will not have undue adverse impact on other environmental values as provided under that statute. Chair Bach?
I am as well, alt 1.
Thank you. Commissioner Huebner?
I'm at alternative 1.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to issue 9. Issue 9 asks if the commission should grant a certificate of public convenience and necessity for the proposed project. Consistent with the discussion here and our positions in issues 1 through 8, I am at alternative 2, that we should grant a CPCN for the proposed project with the conditions discussed and approved today. Chair Bach?
Agreed, alt 2.
Thank you. Commissioner Huebner?
Yep, I'm at alternative 2.
Great, thank you. Well, that concludes our discussion of docket 9814-CE-100. Thank you again to everyone who put so much thought and effort into the record. I think it really helped us to make some good decisions here today.
Great.
Do you want to make the final motion?
I do. In
Okay,
docket
thank you.
9814 CE 100, I move that we approve and grant a CPCN for the proposed project with conditions as discussed today.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Strand. You did an excellent job. And Commissioner Huebner, I want to especially thank you for your perspective. I mean, hearing you talk about, growing up next to the farms, I think that really provides important and helpful perspective, especially for me. So I appreciate that. All right. That concludes our official business for today. The next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 22nd, 2023. Please note that that's a change. Due to a scheduling change, we will not have an open meeting next week. So the next open meeting will be the following Thursday, June 22nd at 10:30.
I move we stand adjourned until Thursday, June 22nd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.